If you're thinking of adding an EFI system on your classic carbureted car, here are a few ways to prep your car before you pull the trigger. Welcome back to the garage, the place where we are making your classic car your dream classic car. Hey, if this is your first time here, I would love to have you subscribe. I'm putting out how-to videos for the weekend mechanic and talking about popular upgrades for the classic car community. I've installed 2 EFI systems on my 1975 Ford Bronco, and the first time I did it, I thought I would remove the carburetor and just drop on the fitech, but that wasn't the case. So here's my list on how to prep your car for EFI. Now, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is make sure that you have a good 12-volt key-on power source. When I first installed my fitech, I found a 12-volt power source, but it would turn off while you were cranking the engine. So essentially, my fitech would turn on the fuel pump, it would start getting fuel, be ready for spark, I would turn to crank, and it would turn off. I'd get 0 volts. So you wanna make sure that you have a good 12-volt key on, crank on, I forget what all it's called, but where when you're cranking the engine, you're still getting a full 12 volts of power going to your EFI system. Speaking of 12-volt power source, you want to make sure that your battery is in good health. A lot of these classic cars, you know, you can get away with a weak battery or a battery that you've had for years that's just kind of limping along. But when you put one of these EFI systems on there, you really want to make sure that your battery is healthy and that it has a full 12-volt charge and holds a 12-volt charge, or else you might drive it down the road and then get stranded when you're buying ammo at Walmart. And number 3 is your intake manifold. Now, a lot of the systems, it depends on what you're buying, but a lot of them are gonna require you to have a specific intake manifold. I think the intake manifold for the fitech was a 2-barrel intake manifold, and there's some that just 4-barrel, whatever it is. You want to make sure that you check whatever EFI system that you want. You want to make sure that you have the right intake manifold for that system. Like I said, when I first put the fitech on, my stock intake manifold wouldn't work. And so I had to buy another intake manifold. Not a huge deal, but it's something that I didn't consider when I just bought the EFI system. I thought, oh, I'll just buy the unit and just throw it on. And come to find out, I needed a new intake manifold. So definitely take a look at that. Cool thing when I swapped to the ProFlo 4 is it has the intake manifold already seated to the throttle body, so you don't need a new intake manifold when you get the ProFlo 4. Now, the 4th thing is throttle body height. So the EFI systems like the fitech and Sniper sit a little bit higher than your stock carburetor will. And if you add in there a new intake manifold, that might sit a little bit higher as well. And then add on top of that, the Edelbrock ProFlo sits about 3/4 of an inch higher than the fitech did on my Bronco. So you want to make sure that you have enough room under your hood. I have a 1-inch body lift on my Bronco, so that gave me enough room, but sometimes a new hood or just adding an additional body lift is going to be in order to make sure that you have enough room for your throttle body. Now, the next thing on my list is the distributor. Now, most EFI systems are going to require you to either get a new distributor or to lock out your current distributor if it works with the EFI system. This is an additional cost that you have to factor in when you're buying an EFI system. The nice thing about the Edelbrock ProFlo is it actually comes with a distributor and a new intake manifold. Now the next thing that you want to do to get your car ready for EFI is seal up your exhaust. When I first put my fitech on, my exhaust was leaking all over the place, and because of that, fresh air was getting in and affecting my O2 sensor, which was causing my fitech to run super rich. And so what I had to do, I went through exhaust manifold gaskets, I went through the exhaust and just sealed up everything on the exhaust. And that's when my fitech began working properly, was once I got all the exhaust leaks sealed up. With your carburetor, you can kind of get away with it because your carburetor is not reading the exhaust like your EFI is, because all of these EFIs are self-learning. So they're reading what your exhaust is putting out and saying, oh, it's too rich or too lean. And that's what it's changing when it's self-learning. So it's really important to have your exhaust all sealed up. Speaking of your O2 sensor, number 7, you're gonna need to drill for an O2 sensor. Now this isn't really difficult, but you just wanna make sure that you have the space to drill into your exhaust and to place your O2 sensor in there. And you're also gonna wanna get one of these little Christmas tree bits if you don't already have one. I'll put a link in the description below where you can get this one. And my final prep for your car, putting on EFI, is fuel delivery. Now let me just say right now, with the fitech, do not buy the fuel command center. There's a lot of these units that you hook up your stock fuel line to this machine that basically pumps through the fuel and then pumps it into the EFI unit. All of these work for a time, they work in certain circumstances, but they are not good long-term solutions. And you've just spent a couple $100 where you could have bought a in-tank fuel pump or a frame-mounted fuel pump that's gonna be a lot better and last you a lot longer. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of with an in-tank pump or an inline pump is you might have to rerun your fuel lines. You might have to do a couple things to get it ready for the fuel pump. But that is a big one when you're considering buying one of these EFI systems, because they advertise it as, oh, you just drop it on and boom, you're done. You've got EFI. But really, there's a lot of these things that you have to consider. You have to consider your intake manifold, you have to consider your distributor, you have to consider your fuel delivery, your fuel pump, you have to consider your fuel lines. So when you're thinking of an EFI system, don't just think about it as the throttle body and that's it. Think of these other things. Prep your car for these other things to really get yourself ready for EFI and get yourself ready for the system. Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you've installed EFI on your classic car, leave it in the comments below. What are some of the things that you felt like you missed when you got the EFI system? Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.